Welcome to this session on security awareness. I have with me Michael Mahan of Atata, who's going to give CISOs ways that the CISO can combat the human risks, the risks that your employees will do something accidental or click on the email. And Michael, the floor is all yours.
Great. Michael Madden, CEO of Atata. My background is military intelligence. I'm actually still in the Army Reserves, and I ran the intelligence department out of the Treasury Department from around 2008 to 14 or so. And then left Treasury to join a company called Red Owl, which was actually recently acquired by Raytheon. And what Red Owl did was it looked at the malicious insider. And during this process, I had this huge insight that the biggest problem was actually not the malicious insider, but the average employee. IBM came out with this study. It was just validated by a recent study that roughly between 75 and 95% of breaches involve some sort of human error. So let's meet him.
Security breaches are massively expensive, and most of them are due to 95% of all security breaches. Staggering. This is a pretty big deal. Yeah, it's very convincing. I like to give the people sets, throw in, if you will. Oh, you have to see question with everything. Oh, that's great. You got to post that. Just email yourself a while so you really get right on the information. That's the judgment of cost. By 2019, the cost of security breaches globally is expected to exceed $2 trillion. Yeah, $2 trillion. People tend to hear his voice in their head louder than they mind. Whoa, slow down. Think about what you're doing. There's nothing to think about. Tap, it's done. Do you have it? If you know what we sent it to you, don't make it ready. Look at it. You can't just leave this stuff there. You've done 60 seconds, 90 tops if you watch your kids. Whatever. Look for a China guy. Okay. Take on the best.
And human error does. It really does take down the best. And so, why do people make these mistakes? So we did some deep work on this, and like most deep work, we actually came up with 3 very basic reasons about why people make the mistakes. And next slide. And people make security mistakes for 3 basic reasons. One is it's a knowledge issue. And if you look at generationally, you have Generation Z, the tail end of the millennial generation, who really don't have a very good sense of like what's right and what's wrong. That plugging in a USB stick is actually incredibly dangerous. Google has done studies on this. Even the CIA has done studies on this, where they drop thumb drives in parking lots, in parks, and it's incredible, like well over 50% continually plug them in, unknown USB sticks, plug them into their computers. So basic knowledge is a problem, but that's not the biggest problem. The biggest problem is by far engagement. And what I mean by engagement is people know generally the right thing to do. They know that plugging in a USB stick is probably not the safest thing. They know that sending work email to their personal account is not the safest thing. But they're really busy, right? They're worried about picking up their kids from daycare. They're worried about getting a memo to the boss. They're worried about making their quarter. And the last thing they're thinking about is security. It's not top of mind. And so security mistakes happen. People lose their jobs. Companies get their brand destroyed, all because of an employee that actually wants to do well. And that brings me to the 3rd type of problem, and that's a bad attitude. Now, here's what this is not. This is not a bad employee. This could be an awesome employee. But this awesome employee has a bad or dismissive attitude about security. And we find this really, really common in the Generation Z and the tail end of the millennial generation, where their view of security is something that's dismissive. They don't see how security plays an important role to themselves, and they don't see why it's an important role to the success of their company. And so they dismiss it. So these are the core reasons why people make security mistakes. So here's an example.
Whoa! Miners, keepers, that's tiresome. You cannot keep that. Oh, personally, that possession is something of the law. 9 times, but that's not the point. You don't know what's on that. Which is why we gotta get into some shit. Stand. How do you know the law? You don't know where it's been. Come on, it's not safe. Well, next to the arguments, but why do you go around a couple of questions and the source sauce? Well, okay, hear me out. I go straight. We're not done here. Good. Okay. All right. Now that the quiz is on, what do you say about that bad way or not? All right. We'll start with the pictures of video. That's the way to do it. So curious. Yeah, come on. So what we're doing, we'll just wipe it. You know, you push this around, that's your job.
Happens every day, all the time, with lots of different things. Happens with emails, happens with USB sticks, happens with letting somebody into your company without checking their ID. It is absolutely ubiquitous and happens all the time, and companies are just absorbing these huge costs. So what have we done about it? So part of the problem with really figuring out how to solve this problem is you need employee data in order to solve an employee problem. And boy, is there a lot of data out there. There's tons of it. But it's really, really hard, right, to separate the signal from the noise. So we have some knowledge data on employees. We have some engagement data, maybe on employees. Sentiment's really, really hard. And then it's super hard to compare one employee with another employee within your own organization. That's hard enough. It's really hard to do that at scale. So what have people been doing? Well, most people are here, and so if you can't read this, this is compliance-based. And so most security programs are compliance-based. And what that means is check the box. We need to do X, Y, and Z. By golly, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And so the security programs are based on that. Now, obviously, that's not everyone, right? And the people who are here, probably a little bit more than a compliance-based program. But most security programs around the world, if they have one, it's a compliance-based program. It's really hard to get into a threat, risk, and intelligence-driven security program. But there's only one way that you can move from a compliance-based program, right, to a threat, a risk, or an intelligence program. And that is, you need data. And so there's a lot of data. You need data to move up to intelligence-driven. And as you can see, there's different groupings of the data, right? There's emails, there's transactional data, there's enrichment data, there's HR data, right? There's tons of data. There's log data, there's physical door swipe, right? And so there are even some systems of systems that collect all this data, like in a SIM. The only way that anybody can have a risk-based program is through data. Because you need data to understand what your employees are doing. And you need data to understand and compare what is your risk versus reward, what's your risk versus reward with regard to your employees. So you've got tons of data. And there are lots of companies out there that have really interesting ways of exploiting this. Some are using some really cool machine learning algorithms to do it, right? How they're collecting the data is really creative, right? So there's some really innovative work that's going on with all of this data to make a program that's really an intelligence or risk. You want to be in the risk-based, intelligence-driven program. That's the ideal. But there's a problem. And this problem is called GDPR. So in the States, the company owns the data. The company owns employee data. If I'm in a company, and I'm in the United States, it's a US company, and I have an email, I don't own that email. The company owns the email. The company can exploit that email. They can do really cool things with that email. They can figure out what's my sentiment on that email. They can figure out where's that email going. They can figure out every way along the life cycle of that email. They can listen to what I'm saying. They can see what my log information is. They can look at all those great data sources without my permission. It's their data. GDPR comes along. Now, GDPR, right, has an entirely different conception of it. The GDPR conception is the individual owns their own data and loans that data to the company. And that company has an obligation to do a couple of things. Has an obligation to do a couple of things with that employee's data. And one of them is to ask consent. Who, in their right mind, is going to say, okay, company, you can take my email and do whatever you want with it. Look at what's going on with Facebook. Look what's going on with Google. Look what's going on even with Twitter. And you're saying that, and these are tools that people want to use. People don't want this. So there's a huge problem that's like right there. We are like about to face it. So if you're a US company that has zero, absolutely no interaction with Europe whatsoever, and you're selling lollipops down the street, you're good. You don't have to worry about this. You're totally off the hook. Totally good. But if you're a multinational company in any way, you touch Europe in any way, this is here. It's now. It's like May 30th. 20, what is it? What is 30th? 25th. It's here. And guess what employees are going to do? They're going to say, no effing way. So all of these incredible companies that have this really great stuff that can take data and look at changes in behavior, and I come from this world, I come from the UBA world, I know it. I know what these tools can do. They're really freaking cool. Employees don't consent. Guess what you don't have? Data. You don't have the data. And if you don't have the data, you cannot have a risk-based program. Period. You can't have one. You can only have a compliance program, which means all that work, your greatest vulnerability of your employee, you're in some serious trouble because you don't have the data. Oh, and by the way, the data you do have, this is the beauty part. An employee can say, I want all my data deleted. They have a right to be forgotten. So the data you do have is now actually at risk. So here are 4 things that I think within GDPR that truly are going to impact this, right? One is that data has to be used for the purpose for which it was collected. Wow. Wow. That alone is so freaking interesting and complicated, right? So emails. What is the purpose for you collecting an email? Wait, what are you collecting that email for? Are you collecting the email so that your employee can have a communication with another employee? Okay, well that's okay. Wait, what else are you doing with that email? You're checking for like sentiment or anomaly in that email? But that's not what you collected. I'm sorry. Are you an organization that's selling widgets, or are you just spying on your own people? What's going on here? What's the purpose of that email? You can see where this can go. And that is just used for the purpose for which it was collected. Okay, consent must be given for collection of personal data. You have to have consent of personal data. Now, in the States, if you say what's personal data, in a digital world, right, that's probably, someone's going to say your social security. And if you said to someone in the States, is personal data your email address? Nah, not really. Oh, but in this case it is. Absolutely. Email address, personal data. IP addresses are classified as personal data, right? And the IP addresses are also included. And then data must be permanently erased if requested. Okay, so you can say, one, you have to use it for the purpose for which it was collected. Ouch. Then you have to ask consent. Then, if they're feeling differently about it, they can get it all deleted. Holy moly. And just think about RSA. Think about all the companies at RSA that have all this incredible technology to do stuff with data And GDPR is coming, and they mean it. You know, with Secure Guard and a lot of the different stamps of approval that we had in the past, there was a blind eye, absolutely a blind eye to what was going on. Not with GDPR. It's real. So, what do? You can't give up, right? You can't say, okay, well, I guess we're done, and just pack it up, right? That's not the way of our people, right? We don't do that. Because you got to figure out, what do you do? So when you're hit with something like this, you go back to the cutting room floor, or the analogy that I like to think of. After the storm is exploit the data that remains. So this is from Forrest Gump. And if those of you who remember Forrest Gump, the shrimp boat, they were dying. They couldn't sell it. They couldn't catch any shrimp. Then there was that one during the storm. Their boat was out in the storm, and every other boat that was docked got crashed, got destroyed. So they were finally able to make some money by catching the fish because they were the last remaining boat. So what do? You exploit the data that remains within your environment. And so what is that? Well, it's this crappy compliance data that you were ignoring for all that time. Okay, that's interesting. Compliance. What can you do with that? Because it's one of the last remaining sources of data that you have. And part of that, of compliance, within the security framework, right, the security awareness training. That's interesting. So you have all this really complicated data sources that are out there, but they're all incredibly vulnerable. Training? Not so much. People get training. They get it. Employees understand that if you're asking them a question, that you're asking them a question because it's for a training purpose. That's a very different purpose than for collecting your email to check your sentiment, right? This is to meet a compliance requirement. Different type of collection. So there's training data out there, right? Which is, in my view, on the cutting room floor. And that's data that can actually be exploited in really interesting ways. And so one way of doing that is you take the different parts of the employee experience, which is engagement, knowledge, and sentiment. These are the three areas that comprise an employee's digital exhaust, right? This is what makes a person. It's what they know, it's what they feel, right? And it's how engaged they are in the process. So training data, interestingly enough, right, can collect this in interesting ways. And asking for consent to be trained is a whole lot different than asking for consent to check your log information or your door swipes. And then you have to take that data and you have to use, right, some sort of cloud so that you can take that data and work with it. So a problem with current training data, right, is that in many organizations, it's not connected to anything. It's sitting on a hard drive somewhere, or it's sitting in some like SCORM compliant environment where it cannot be exploited or used, right? So this is where the power of the cloud comes in, because you can take that training data, you can push it up to a cloud, right? And then you can actually work with that data. But if it stays on the premises, right, you can't do anything with it, and it just stays within your environment, and there's no learning going on. There's no like global learning going on, right? And so you take that data, and then you figure out a way, right, to move that into the cloud so that you can begin to really think about how do I determine employee risk based on training data. And then you move it up to a corporate level. Now the corporate level, again, only works by comparing companies with companies if you're in the cloud. Otherwise, there's no way of standardizing. Next. And so the takeaway here is that, and this is one example, right? Training data is one example you can use. So what I would encourage you to do is go within your data pool, within your organizations, and say, what data is going to be left? After GDPR, what data is left within my environment that I can use to begin to move and crawl back up into a risk-based approach? Because there is going to be data pools, the current data, oh, by the way, Even if some of your employees consent, others won't. What do you do with that? What do you do with that? Right? So with these, I didn't mention this, with these sophisticated tools, right? If you have half your employees saying yes, opting in, and half your employees not opting in, well, then you have a worse problem than before. But training data, a little bit different, right? People opt into training. So figure out within your environment, what other data sources are there? You have training data, that's one. Right? You have HR data, that's one. That's there. And the real trick of it, is having a transparent engagement with your employees and really seeing what's there that's going to be powerful. Because the security professional is not in the driver's seat under GDPR. Not the driver's seat. And so this is an example. So for training, for example, right? That means your training needs to actually be really good. And most training is really bad. Most training is really boring and it's god-awful and no one wants to do it. So you need to have a training approach, like, that actually engages the employee and moves the needle on this crazy thing called culture. If you don't move the needle on culture, you're not going to change your security environment. You're not going to reduce risk. So part of what you need is really awesome training. And apply sort of this template with the other data that you find within your environment, right? Because now that you're not in the driver's seat and the employee's in the driver's seat, what do they want? What are they looking for? What gets their attention? What are they going to consent to? Because they control that. And it should be something that if they're engaged, right, then they're open to learn, and then it changes ultimately not only their behavior, it changes the culture in the company. And the other trick is you need to have something, right, that some dashboard, most dashboards have these cool little circles on them. I was at RSA and they generally look kind of like this. No matter what it is, kind of looks like that. And that's good, standardization of the golden donut. But you need a platform, right, that's able to take this data that's on the cutting room floor and do really interesting stuff. What I mean by interesting stuff is figure out, right, how to take that training data, right, and roll it up and think about it in some way that equates to risk. Because ultimately, this is a risk discussion. It's about risk and how to minimize the risk. And so we'll leave with sound judgment.
The key is to give employees a compelling reason to actually care about security. Once people start becoming engaged and interested, then they start making better choices. Better choices lead to fewer breaches and ultimately save companies time and money. Leave Q&A with nothing to say.
That's on the state.
All right.
Thanks. All right, questions?
Yeah, I come from a military intelligence background. So
Sorry.
Maybe.
I thought you said military intelligence.
Maybe, yeah, it's an oxymoron, I know. So, I mean, better training is obviously, awesome. It'd be great to have better training. I don't dispute that, but for security, I mean, it's kind of a weak standard, I would say.
Yeah, it's a weak standard because people have viewed training as compliance.
Right.
So let me challenge you, right? So, for example, let's say that you have a training module. How long did it take for that person to actually take the training? Did they get the question right or wrong? How did they do compared to their industry peers? Did they actually click on a fish test? Did they report that an email could possibly be a fish? There are sentiment questions, right, that are informed by academia. How do they score on those sentiment questions? How do they score on those sentiment questions compared to peers, right, and compared to other people in the industry, compared to people within their company, right? So there's ways within what which seems like compliance, right, to actually test out, right? I'm actually looking at things like behavior. Did they sit on their training for a month before they took it, or did they take it right away? Right? When they before they clicked on a phishing test, a phishing campaign, what was their reaction time? How long did they sit thinking about it? And then when they actually clicked on it, did they input their social security number, or then did they realize, oh my God, this is a fish, like I'm going to report this? But all of those points in between can be measured, right? And they can be compared with other elements and other information you have. For example, right? How are people who are privileged users doing on the training? Right? Are privileged users doing better on the training? Maybe if a privileged user has a high knowledge, right, but they have a low sentiment, they have a bad attitude, that's okay. Because a privileged user, they all have bad attitudes, right? They're tech geeks and they don't have a great attitude. And maybe someone in human resources has a great attitude but has a knowledge problem. But let's say that those things were switched, right? Let's say that you take training data and you measure it against, dare I say, actual breach data. Well, now you have something interesting. Now you have something, right, that's a point of true comparison. Now you can actually validate training based on actual breaches. So you have this data that's sitting there. And the reason why the data is so cool, right, is because it's kind of binary, right? It's really measurable and it's simple. But if you combine that with other sources of data, you now have something that's on fire. And it's a real risk. I would say, that's great. The attitude of training is not like whatever. It's just, it is what it is. It's not going to move behavior. No, but you can identify who within. I would say, yes, it could. If it's really good, it changes the culture. But then on the back end, you can rack and stack. Who's most at risk in your organization, right? Who's most prone, right, to commit the next employee mistake, just based on the training data.
So when you say breach data, you mean, for example, how and through which employee was it HR did this company get breached? Through which
how did it happen, right? Yeah. So the long process is, right, how did it happen? There was a breach in a company, and it happens all the time, right? They're typically not reported for a variety of reasons, right? Why did this breach occur? It was almost certainly because of a mistake, right? Almost certainly somebody in that company made a mistake. That's why that breach happened. What was that person's risk score in the training platform? How do they do on the training? And like, let's refine that training, right? And let's adjust that training and that algorithm to then meet that. Because then it becomes, right, there's a buzzword, but this is true, it becomes supervised machine learning. That is the definition of supervised machine learning. You have the answer, you have data. You can figure out how that data meets that answer. And then you learn. And then you can see if an employee does X, Y, or Z on training, wow, they're actually riskier. So maybe if a privileged user has a great attitude, but doesn't answer the knowledge question well, that's has a great attitude, but doesn't answer the knowledge question well, then that's really an indicator of a problem, right? Where with HR, it's okay. If they have a good attitude and they don't answer the knowledge question well, then you can mitigate that risk. Like, that's not necessarily a high risk. But you don't know any of that, right? Unless you compare it in many ways to real world data. And so that's really the exciting part. Like, the future of this is you take this data, you compare it to real world data, supervised machine learning, and you get a really robust risk.
Yeah, so I'd say that's one paradigm. I'd say there's another paradigm within the industry as well. It's basically to take the user out of the equation, right? Okay. So, something like no passwords. There's no way you can breach someone's account because they don't have a password anymore.
Okay, and just to push back on that, when's that happening? I mean, seriously. Like, when is that really going to happen?
When is this really happening?
It's happening now, right? But there's no password, right?
There is no password.
What I mean is, people have their own personal computers. Those passwords aren't going away. That's a long tail, right?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
How long a tail was internet adoption?
If passwords go away, then that's a great data point. That doesn't have to be factored in.
I mean, companies have control over what is adopted inside their company, right? If they have to apply with GDPR and they really want to be secure, You have no passwords.
Okay. And my response to that is great. There's so many other human vulnerabilities. You pick one. You can pick all down the line.
Sure,
there are human vulnerabilities.
but phishing is probably one of the highest. I mean, all the data points.
Phishing is huge.
It's huge.
Yes.
So, I mean, get rid of one of the largest vulnerabilities.
By no password, you don't have phishing problems.
You don't have phishing problems because you can't phish if no one has passwords.
What about ransomware?
That's still a problem.
So, if you don't have passwords, what's your authorization?
Yeah, so you have either authorization app on your phone, or you have some sort of file if you carry it all past.
Yeah, there's always a human factor.
Of course, there's always a human factor.
Oh,
But if you can't be phished, that takes care of one.
but you can be phished.
One problem.
Phishing, huge problem. People getting a phone call from Wendy in IT, asking to send the boss $10,000. There is always a human element. So you can, and look, this is the game, right? It's, okay, we take away passwords. Awesome. I can assure you there's going to be another human vulnerability that comes into play.
Sure, but
So
this is the guy to take care of the problems that you can solve. And that's one problem you can solve.
I don't disagree. We're not disagreeing. Great. If you can get rid of passwords, and I could, with a snap, I can get rid of, and by the way, passwords on people's personal computers too, because people are sending work information to personal accounts all the time.
Yeah, well, that's easy to mitigate at the firm. Because if you try to send a work email out to your personal, you just block.
So why doesn't everyone do it today?
I don't know. I'd go ask them.
So I think for the time being, we're in a situation where it's a hybrid approach. You have to
That's
have
right.
non-technical controls, such as procedures, you have to have training, and then you have to have those technical controls. So in that top quadrant where you've got the more advanced behavioral sort of what I'd call protective monitoring is, basically you're watching what your employees are doing, and if they cross various lines, you have triggers that will detect that, and then you can follow up with whatever process. So I can't actually see a situation where you could realistically, in a large-scale enterprise, not have that level of protective monitoring in place. But the dilemma there is getting consent to do that.
Tricky.
For new employees, it's very straightforward. Here's the contract of employment. If you want to work for us, you have to agree to the whatever we have in place.
I think that's illegal. You can't force the employee.
Well, I know. I think that's fair within the contract of employment. It's
I'm pretty sure it's the GDPR.
I would agree to differ on that one.
I'm sure we'll see a court case again about it, and I'm sure the employee will win that.
But I think the dilemma is where you've got an existing workforce, and then you say, okay, because of GDPR, we're now going to have to require you to sign this consent of this new whatever we're going to do with your data. That's where you have some legal employee issues, because this guy may work with an organization for
15 years.
Yeah, 10 years. And you're then asking them to re-engage, and that's, I think, what creates some
Right. And all they need to say is no.
Yeah. So ultimately, yes, there are going to be some interesting court cases and case law that will kind of reveal how this is going to be rolled out. There's a possible argument for saying that Europe may have gone into deeply with GDPR. It's a heck of a fine, 20 million euros, or 4% of global annual revenue is a maximum fine. But the question I would have is, in your own statement, Michael, you stated that any multinational organisation that's operating in Europe is going to have to comply with this. And I guess most large, medium-sized US organisations are going to therefore have to comply with this.
Yes.
My question would be, do you think it's inevitable that the US will come out with its own form of GDPR?
There's no question.
Yeah.
I think there's no question.
Yeah.
Really? Absolutely. I don't think there's a question.
Articles about the U.S. passing that some sort of law like GDPR.
But did you see the softballs that they threw from Mark Zuckerberg in the hearing? They are not going to. they're not going to legislate anything like that.
Not under the current administration.
So I don't think it's going to come. I think it's going to come from necessarily the government. What's going to happen is the scenario that, when I said certainly, what's going to certainly happen is it's going to be mandated. The global companies are going to mandate their U.S. vendors and suppliers to be GDPR compliant.
Yes.
So forget about the legislation. It's not going to come from the legislation.
My company has to be GDPR compliant.
It will just naturally happen.
It will happen. And it will happen because the Europeans are serious about it. And they weren't before. Right? The safe harbor and all that, there was a stamp. Paid $150, wait a month. Now it's serious. And so they're going to require their vendors. I'm already getting, my company, we're getting questions right now. What are you doing about GDPR? Right now, it's a global company, but they have some global, they have some US. Doesn't matter. I mean, they're holding companies. They have 10 companies. They didn't ask me, what are you doing with the global companies? Because they have some US only companies. What are you doing with your global companies, with the global companies that you're servicing for us? What are you doing about GDPR? They didn't say that. They said, what are you doing about GDPR? Very fancy law firm sent us all their forms. And it was basically a GDPR checklist. It's happening now. So that's how it's absolutely going to happen. And then the US companies that are not going to be GDPR compliant, it's like going to be that lollipop store. Basically. Anyone who's a vendor for a global company is going to have to be GDPR.
You don't think it's going to be like PCI DSS, where around the time of your audit self-assessment, your annual self-assessment, you polish up your procedures?
You can't do it that way.
No.
You can't do it that way. Because you have to, so we have to ask consent. So we obviously have trained. We have to ask consent. Everybody. Current employees, new employees. We have to ask consent of everybody. Every time someone new comes onto our platform or existing, we have to ask consent.
But it's also breach.
So we can't wait. We can't wait for some audit and then for that audit to say, oh, you need to have everyone consent. It's like we're a day late and a dollar short. So it starts now.
Because there's a requirement to report a breach within 72 hours to the affected individuals, then in essence you can't wait until that annual audit. You've got to be on your toes and you get fined if you basically screwed up.
I've talked to companies that choose to ignore the GDPR entirely, saying it will never affect them, and they don't care.
And you know what? Here's what I would say. That's awesome because guess what? They're cool right now. They could totally blow it off. So like they're really smart. And they've got, I don't know, like 4 weeks to figure this thing out. I don't know. Because here's what's going to happen. Listen, I've been on panels where people have said the same thing.
Yeah.
And I think they're nuts. Like, I think it's absolutely batshit crazy. I think it's nuts. Because what's going to happen is their clients are going to send them the same document that I got from a fancy law firm that says, where are you with your GDPR compliance? Where are you? Like, what are they going to do when they get one of those? And they will, unless they're selling lollipops on the corner.
There's another guy in Peerlyst. He's arguing that as soon as GDPR goes live, the European lawmakers are going to realize that they went too far and they're going to water it down by like 75% within a year.
Okay. And
the reason he said that he thinks they're going to do that is he thinks that businesses, US businesses primarily, are going to pull out of Europe because they don't want to do it.
No, you're not going to pull out of Europe.
I said, I disagree.
I mean, look, I'm a U.S. business. I'm a U.S. business, and we love our European clients. And like, oh, we're pulling. That's nuts.
Yeah.
Like,
Just think about AWS pulling out of
but
Europe. Is that going to happen?
He's not always saying this argumentation, but he really thinks that. He's a CISO for a big company himself.
is that big company going to pull out of Europe? No way. No way.
CISOs generally don't make those decisions.
Let me tell you what's going to happen. To your point, here's exactly what's going to happen. The C-suite of that company is going to say, no, you figure it out. What do we need to do to be compliant? We'll assume that as part of our costs, and we're going to be compliant, and we're going to service Europe.
Yeah.
But period. That's what we did.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we're doing. Like, there's no, That's what's going to happen. But it's not going to come from legislation. I mean, that's probably not going to happen.
That's what I thought you meant initially. And I just don't see that happening.
No, it's going to come. It's going to come organically. It's going to come the way it's coming now.
Yeah.
Which is, you get a letter from your client's fancy law firm that says, you fill this thing out, here's the checklist, you what do you do?
Can I ask you a question? Given your client base, what do you think is on average the time it's going to take like an average size business to become compliant?
6 months to a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Probably, and the rest, if they've been in business a while, and they've collected customer data or even colleague data, because that data will be in databases, it will be in backups, and if that individual says, you know what, I now want you to forget about me, they've got to go through all that data and scrub it.
And if the data privacy regime in Europe is smart, they'll give people that time. And I think they will. Like, they're just going to check, how are you doing? Like, what are you doing? Do you care? Do you have a DPO? Do you have a DPO? Do you have a DPO? Question number one. And if the answer to that is yes, I think there's going to be sigh of relief, and then they'll work. If they're smart, if they don't know, I mean, Americans are funny beasts, right? We'll play along and we'll do this because we want to succeed. But it's just there's going to be a grace period. I know this is the grace period. It must be like another grace period, but it's going to take 6 months to a year. Like, there's no way that a company even we're a small company. There's no way that you can just from ground zero get up and running and be GDPR compliant in a month. It takes 2 months to do the audit,
And that's even for a small one.
even for a smaller company. It takes 2 months, 3. Honestly, it took us like 2 to 3 months to do the audit. If you're really doing it, it takes a while.
Well, what do we find out? Where do we have data? Where do we?
You have to get an assessment, right? So I mean, it's a bear. You have to get assessment. Where are you? Here are the requirements that are GDPR. Where are you? You got to do that. And then part of what we offer is there's another component, which is making your employees aware of what GDPR is.
Right.
So we actually have that service, but we had to do it ourselves. Like, we had to make our employees aware, and that's like, since we're in this business, we have that little component of GDPR. But yeah, it takes a while.
Do you do the audit yourself?
No, you can't do the audit yourself.
No. Do you do the audit?
No,
You don't.
no, we're not an audit.
But there is no one.
No.
No, but there is an expertise that's like
There's like maybe
evolving
30,000.
now.
Oh, it's an industry.
Yeah, GDPR.
Right. So the part that we play from a business perspective is we make the employees aware of GDPR, what their rights are, and we actually work with the UK firm. And someone really wants to nerd out on it. We work with a UK company, our DPO and a UK do a deeper dive if someone's really going to get out on it.
They want to.
Yeah. Yep.
That's great. Can you talk a bit about the cost of it? The cost of the process?
I mean, that's not my area of expertise. I think it's probably different. I don't think it's a little painful, but not overly painful. The painful part's going to be if you don't do it.
Yeah.
Pretty much. The painful part is if you try to be cute at it. And we made a decision as a company, like, straight off, like, because of my background, I knew how serious this was. Like, sometimes you make great decisions, sometimes you make terrible decisions, sometimes you see what's coming, like, very, very clearly. I saw this very clearly a year and a half. And I said, we need to get our company in the right place. And so you have to do it, like, with a true heart, and you have to, like, really do it. And I think if you do it that way, it'll be fine. If you try to be cute, it's not going to work. You can't be cute. So we're not going to be cute. But there are going to be companies that are going to try to be cute.
I know. I met it.
Yeah, and the chickens are going to come home to roost.
They won't be cute
Yeah,
anymore.
right. Yeah.
What I liked most was the risk score.
Yes,
Because
that's what I like most.
CISO, that gives me a metric that I can see better over time.
Yes. And really the risk score, the trick of the risk score, right, is that you take different components. You take different components of the training experience, and then you put them through an algorithm, and you actually weight them and score them based on, certain interfactor weights. Like, that's how you do it.
Yeah.
That's right.
Every CISO is looking for metrics to report. So
right, and then you can take those risk
compare
scores.
to other companies. Right?
Well, Right, and then you can take that risk score, and then you can also compare it to other data sources. Like that's another really cool part. So it's not like a standalone. If you can find other data sources that survive the storm, right, you can all have to incorporate that also into like a larger score as well. Cool. Very nice to meet you.
This will total appreciation for it. Thanks for speaking, Mark. And I also have a few stickers for you. A Peerlyst sticker.